Welcome to Roll to Save, the RPG history podcast. Halls of the Blood King.
So hello and welcome to a special edition of Roll to Save. We are lucky enough today to be joined by world famous author and hopefully soon award winner, Diogo Nogueira. How are you, Diogo?
Hey, I'm great. It's great to be here talking to you, talking about games. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I'm not so sure that I'm world famous, but yeah, I've been lucky enough to be nominated for Ennie awards this year. So yeah, I'm excited. Yeah,
you've been nominated for an Ennie, or as Instagram put it today when I put up a post about this interview, an Emmy, because autocorrect clearly doesn't know the word Ennie. So I had to correct that. That's not the award that you're up for.
Yeah. Not yet.
Not yet. No, I mean, who knows? It's a whole different career you could be going into. Yeah.
There's a musician here in Brazil that's pretty famous. That's called Diogo Nogueira too. So who knows? Maybe he wins something.
Yeah, well, it could be your two paths could cross and you could collaborate. I'm pretty sure Halls of the Blood King could be a very good metal album. It's certainly got that ring to it. So before we get into talking about your work itself, I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask everyone that we have on the show, and that's, how did you get involved in the RPG hobby in the first place? What were your first games? Have you run games? How did you get dragged into this hobby?
Yeah, when I was in elementary school, I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was studying in a Catholic school here in Brazil. And for some reason that year, the teachers let us choose like any book for us to read and write about. My friends, there was like a vote. So kids would suggest different books. And the most voted one would be picked for the class to read. And a kid just said to play the Death Trap Dungeon, Steve Jackson Games game book that had been translated to Brazil. I didn't know anything about that. And that thing won. Death Trap Dungeon for like 7 or 8 years old. And then we bought the books and I played it. And for me, it was something incredible because it was a book I could choose what I was going to do. And I got hooked right away. And I started hunting down other fighting fantasy books here in Brazil. And I collected them for quite a while. And when I reached about 10 years old, I moved to another school, another part of the city. And my neighbors who were older, possibly 14 to 15 years old or something, saw me playing a fighting fantasy book. And they came to me, "Wow, do you like fighting fantasy and gaming books? You should play a role-playing game with us," which is almost the same thing, but it's so much offers so much more freedom because you can do anything you want. You don't have to follow the directions in the book. And the way they described it, it sounded fantastic. And of course, I accepted playing with them. And they were playing the first Brazilian RPG published here, which is called Tagma. And it's similar to a medieval fantasy with its system. It has its own things. It has some similarities with D&D, some similarities with Faza. It was pretty cool. I made like a warrior, and I died in the first session. And at the end of the session, we went to the building yard, and we buried my character sheet on the yard. And it's like a ceremony, and I was in love because that was a great hobby. We could make up anything we wanted to do, like better than video games or anything else, you know. That was probably around 95, 94, 95. And since then I started looking around for role-playing games. They had just released Dungeons and Dragons here in Brazil with the Challenger box, that black Dungeons and Dragons box with a red dragon. And I bought that. I didn't really understand it fully. And I remember thinking that halflings were like a mix of dwarfs and elves. And they were really good because they had the powers of dwarfs and elves for some reason. I played that a lot and then got into GURPS because it was released in Brazil. And then World of Darkness. Then they released the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition here. I remember selling all my books of AD&D to buy 3rd edition D&D. And by that time, I was already reading books in English because I think the first one I bought was Vampire the Dark Ages. And then I started playing Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. Then I continued to play. I stopped briefly during college because I studied art and I was really into dedicating into drawing and painting and doing all kinds of this artistic stuff on college and trying to work with that. But after college, when I got my first job and I started making some money, I got back into the hobby. I started buying books again and seeing what's going on, and found out about the story games and OSR and indie stuff, and for me that was more interesting than the current big names on the hobby.
It's interesting the way you talk about the fighting fantasy being the gateway. You've probably noticed the shelf behind me. There's all these little green spine books. Yeah. That's all my fighting fantasy collection that I've jealously guarded since I was a child, and that is very much how I got into it as well. What was it that got you into writing games or writing modules, scenarios, that sort of stuff in the first place? Was it just this desire to carry on doing your own thing, or was there any specific catalyst that got you in there?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of various factors. I mean, because even when I was like really young and started playing, I adapted some stuff to play settings that I wanted to play. Like I remember like adapting just the rules for the monsters from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons to play something like the Saint Seiya kind of game. But I was a kid, I never really wrote anything. But when I got back playing RPGs after college, and one of the reasons I got into indie game is because I tried to play Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, and it was completely different from what I remember Dungeons and Dragons to be. And like we would play like a session of 4 hours, and it was just one combat. And I tried to play for a year and got really frustrated with it, and started looking for what else is out there. And then I find about the OSR and things like that. And I discovered the zine scene, right? People making zines, people, creators that were on the social media just talking about what they were making. Like they weren't like a big publisher. They were not Wizards of the Coast or White Wolf or anything like that. They were just people like you and me in their homes, just doing their own stuff, and with artists that they were not like that polished art from mainstream games. They were using ink and sometimes even just pencil to do their art. And I got interested in that. You know, that's aesthetic of more like punk, because I really like punk rock too. I played in a band. One of my favorite bands of all time is the Ramones, and this kind of rock. So that culture of do it yourself was very much dear to me because of punk rock. And I started seeing people doing this kind of production, and I was interested in collaborating with them. I did some illustrations for DCC Zines, the Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is a terrific community. It was a community that basically adopted me when I started hanging out on internet spaces. I went to Gen Con in 2014. I didn't know anyone. I hadn't published anything. And people from the DCC community just invited me to join them and hang out and have a bite and have a beer. And it's amazing. I'm friends with a lot of them until today. And sometimes we work together and we talk. We're great people. And I started collaborating doing the zines. And I find out about a book by Ashton Klein called Still Like an Artist, because I wanted to do something, and somehow I noticed the book and I started reading it, and it's really got me into the spirit to, okay, I will do something. I don't care if it will be good or bad. I'm just gonna make something, and it's, if it's not so good, I'll make something else afterwards. And like in 1 month, I wrote, illustrated, and edited the Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells first edition. And after that, I just kept working on gaming stuff, because one of the things that Still Like an Artist say is that you always use the work you have finished to grab something that you haven't really explored further to develop something new. So I made Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells, and after that I made the addendum, which has some complements for this game, and then I grabbed the same game and made it like a science fantasy with solar blades and cosmic spells, and I kept doing that, just using what I had looked into, and developing something derived from the work I have done. And I kept doing this until today.
I like the way you describe the community, because I've seen that with a lot of the independent stuff. In fact, today, prior to this call that we're having just now, I was actually on a discussion thread on Twitter about people making their own stuff. And oddly enough, your name came up. Someone was like, hey, you should have a look at his blog. He's got loads of great ideas on how to be creative. And I think the advent of several companies, Wizards of the Coast being one, of having this open license that says, go for it, go and make your own stuff. It's really inspired that sense of community. I know that certainly the late 90s and early 2000s, things were very rigid because you waited for the next book to come out. And there was some sort of fan stuff up on the internet, but it wasn't massively polished. It was, somebody who'd dabbled with HTML, sticking their custom Vampire the Masquerade clan up on a website somewhere. But with modern technology, with these open licenses, people are actually distributing and building some really great stuff. I mean, you see some of the free things that are out there. It's incredible. I often think
amazing.
These guys could be making money off of this, but they're offering it free or for a Patreon, a small fee per month. Speaking of that sort of stuff, so I have got this lovely book here, Halls of the Blood King, hopefully soon to win an Ennie award. What was your inspiration to produce this book? We'll get into the summary of it in just a second, but it has a very particular atmosphere to it when you read it, but we'll get into that shortly. What was your inspiration? What made you choose this? Because you've said you like to take stuff that you've already made and feed it into new things. Did any of that happen for this? Yes.
I've always been kind of fascinated by blood. I don't know. I like blood, but sometimes when I had to pull out a tooth, and I like the taste of blood. And I don't know, my games, I use it to put vampires or something with the blood corrupts, spells is linked to blood. Like in Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells, for you to cast spell, you can burn your blood to cast it more powerfully. And it's very intrinsic to us, right? Blood runs from our veins and the vitamins. So there is this thing about blood feeding power, and I always like to explore this. So House of the Blood King deals with that. So there is vampires, but it's subverted. There is different kinds of vampires. The flowers are vampires too. There's the spiders, and it's all revolves around blood. Blood is a really featured theme on the adventure, and it has some sci-fi elements too. And I like mixing sci-fi with fantasy. My games show that. Even Sharp Swords, which was supposed to be like a fantasy game, it's like sword and sorcery and pulp fantasy, which really deals with that. Like Conan meets an alien, the Tower of the Elephant. Basically, he's meeting like an alien entity. So I like to dabble with this on my games. And of course there is like Castlevania. It's like an inspiration, like the aesthetic of the game, and kind of Ravenloft a little bit too, right? But I try to explore that like in a different way. It's not just go there and kill the vampire. There's a lot of things going on, and you can work for them if you want, or maybe try to resolve the issues they're having.
If you could sum it up in a single short sentence or paragraph, what would be your sales pitch to people to read this? What would you say is the essence of Halls of the Blood King?
An adventure in a castle with a dysfunctional family of vampires. You can fight or deal with them in other ways, I guess.
What would you say, because there's a lot of, you mentioned it earlier, there's a lot of brilliant individual elements in this adventure. I mean, the book itself is fairly small. I've got a copy here. It's fairly small, but
48 pages, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. I'm going to mention my favorite bits in a minute, but what were your favorite bits to create for it?
For me, it's the planetary model at the end.
And I'm going to try not to spoil this for people who haven't read it. The thing that I liked most about it, because there's a lot of really cool set pieces in it. Like you say, there's politics in there. There's different factions, and I love that there's a section that actually not only gives you a write-up of here's the different factions, but it also says, and here's the relationships between the factions. So if you want to go in and start messing around and playing faction 1 off against faction 2, you can. And here's the things they want and need and how you would deal with them. The thing that I really liked, though, is the time crunch element to it. That after X amount of time, these things start happening. And if you've not completed it by the end of this particular time period, well, guess you're off on a whole new adventure when...
Yeah.
This is not too much of a spoiler. The whole Halls of the Blood King premise is this castle, or manor house, appears in various planes and various spaces of time. It hangs around, causes a load of trouble, and then it vanishes. And if your players aren't out of there by the time this castle has spent in its plane, they're going to end up somewhere.
They're going along.
else, yeah, and you allude to that throughout it because there's characters you can encounter that when you read it, you're like, well, they're obviously aliens. They're not your classic Tolkien D&D-esque monsters. That's clearly an alien, and I love that blending of the two different styles there. What was your favourite part of writing it? Because I know I'm a bit of a frustrated writer myself, and some parts of the writing process are laborious, and you kind of find yourself like, God, more pages, more words. But what was your favourite part of the process of putting this together?
I think it's finding out the little things that will tell a story that's not really clear, like the relationship between the Blood King and the Banshee, or the real small pieces like the bottle of spirits with the eyes that are like a spy for the small details that are interesting and doing something that's not really big or major, but it's small details that help tell a bigger story.
I got that impression reading it, that you were taking a lot of delight in that, because there's one moment, and again, I won't spoil it for people who haven't read it, but the characters come across a mirror, and there's something in the mirror, and there's a tiny, almost like a paragraph worth of information about what's in this mirror, with huge implications for the story. And there's, like those other things you've alluded to, these things are scattered throughout it, and they tell a bigger story, but the details that the players might not come across. And it was something else I noticed with your writing, and it was quite a refreshing change. So when I started gaming back in the 80s, when you bought a published module, you'd have a map, there'd be numbers on various locations, and almost like a fighting fantasy book, you'd turn to location number 1 and you did this big old description. of, you have entered a chamber. It is 40 meters on each side, and on the walls there are tapestries, and there's a throne in the center, and blah, 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 blah. And then there'll be read aloud sections. The goblin chief says, yada, yada, yada. You don't do that in this book. Instead, what you do is you actually offer descriptive notes of what a location is like, or how someone would react, and what they would want. Like you mentioned the character of the Banshee beforehand. She's quite a key character in the plot, but relatively speaking, you devote quite a small amount of time to her, but it's the description and the descriptive aspects and what she potentially wants that lets the person running the game have way more freedom than they ever would have if you go into the Banshee's room, she looks like this, she says this thing to you. And because I always find that aspect of it, it's like a video game side quest. You've hit the checkpoint, the Banshee gives you an information dump and you go off to do something else. Whereas this way, it can be very much threaded into whatever campaign you run. Is that indicative of your style in other pieces that you've put together or in games you run yourself?
To be fair, the format, how it's scripted, how it's formatted, the adventure is like a standard for old school Ascension modules. But I think it's really great. I want to adopt similar style of presenting an adventure for all my stuff like that. It's easy for people to run. If they have to run it right now, they can like read a room and just play that room, and when they go to the next phase, they just give me 5 minutes and you read the room really quickly, and you can play around and interpret it and improvise as you want. But this aspect of not really like a plot or like a video game, a set points that you must go to further the story, that's really what I like to do with my adventures. I like to think them like almost like a play set for toys. There's this location and there's these toys here, and these things are happening, and just play around with it and see where you go with that. Like that's for me. I always try to remember that the game master, the referee, has to have fun too. They don't need to know everything that's going to happen. Just give them some toys and let them play with the players, and let them find out what is going on with the players together with them.
Now, you mentioned earlier your background is in art, that you studied art, you're a creative person, you produce art.
Yeah, I studied graphic design in a school of art. So I studied graphic design, but I took various classes in traditional arts courses like painting or wood carving or all kinds of that. Like even doing like silk screen for t-shirts or.
How much input did you have with the artwork? And the reason I ask that is the artwork very much echoes the writing. Like if you look at that very first page, it describes the guards at the gate of the manor house. The picture of the guards is pretty much what I had in my mind with what is described there. It's almost like a seamless comparison. Did you have input into that? Did you collaborate with the artists, or did you do any of the art yourself?
To be fair, since I'm an artist too, I always like to give artists almost complete freedom if I can, and it was like that with Justine, and I think her art makes the adventure so much better than it would be without it. And the art and the text, they have like a dialogue that they complement each other so well, and it's incredible. I don't think that adventure would be the same thing with another artist. And I to be honest, I'm kind of sad she wasn't nominated for like best art, because it's fantastic. It's something you don't see every day. It's like a treatment to vampires you don't see normally on like horror vampire adventures, because it's like a horror adventure, but it has color, it's bright, it's edgy somehow, it's It's incredible.
You're absolutely right. And I think edgy is a good way of putting it, because right near the beginning of the adventure, the players encounter something called shadow hounds. Now, when you hear that description, if you think of classic fantasy, you'd probably have something kind of come into your mind of some sort of spectral dogs. You then look at the picture of these things that have been drawn, you're like, that is way more frightening than some sort of misty mastiff running after you.
And their paws are almost like hands, so they're kind of, maybe
creepy.
they can manipulate something. That's, wow, that's...
It's the same with, there's a description of things called monstrous doors. You read the description is creepy. It's these doors, they've got veins, they pulse with blood. You know, ultimately, if you wanted, you could hack your way through them, and that's a bit gruesome. And then you see the artwork, and the artwork is for this door leading into this, you know, great hall where there's all these vampires. And it really sets off the scale of, you know, you're going into a room full of these vicious predators who are here because they are top of the food chain. And this door, just a picture of it, you're like, yeah, this is a scary encounter. This is going to be something big that happens here. I think, though, the best illustration in the book, because I love the illustration of the title character, the Blood King. It's a really cool illustration. As you say, it's a bit of a different take on what you'd expect. You know, it's not a vampire in a cloak or varnst during pure blood. It's very different from that. But I love the illustration. I'm not going to spoil any of this because it's a great part of the adventure. But the illustration of the Spider Queen is an incredible.
That's the one I was thinking. He's gonna say the Spider Queen. Spider Queen is really, really, really good. Yeah. But I mean, the first one, even the normal, the guards are fantastic. The illustrations, it's like, wow, what the hell is that? It's kind of gruesome and scary. And they're like the lowest guards of the place. Like,
yeah, the guards, I said, you've got that particular look. I read the description and saw the picture. I was like, that's exactly how I would imagine it. It fits really well, and this whole theme is carried on throughout the book. You mentioned when you described it that the color that's involved. I keep holding this book up to the camera. Nobody can see it. This is a podcast, but people will have seen it on Twitter. There's been a lot of buzz around this particular adventure. The Twitter images don't do it justice. This book is incredibly bright, and there's a very distinctive palette that's used throughout the whole book. There's oranges and purples and dark reds and light blues, and it comes together really well, and it makes it really easy to read. Likewise with the maps in there are phenomenal, because not only are they well laid out, I mean, you open the book and your first two end pages are the maps, and they are descriptive and clear, but when you read through the text, it actually has little mini maps scattered throughout, that if you're the referee running this, it just makes your life so much easier, because it's very clear where the players are, what they're going to encounter, and what the nearby other encounters are. And it just all comes together very nicely. I'm kind of enthusing like a fanboy about this. This is only because I've not got to run it yet, and I'm desperate to. Which brings me to my next question. Have you run this? And if so, how did it go?
Oh, yeah. I play tested it before submitting to Gavin to publish, right? I've run it like 4 times, and I plan on running it more. And I gave it some friends here in Brazil too, for them to play test before I send it to Necrotic Gnome. So yeah, I've run it a few times. There is a group streaming the adventure here in Brazil. I like it because of some of the stuff that I added to the adventure was because of the playtest that I saw. I could add something here, and here's just too easy. I'm gonna put some tricks here or there. And they gave me feedback, and I worked it in the adventure, like tied the knots, you know.
Whenever people talk about the old school revival, there's or Renaissance or whatever R you currently want to use, there's always that feeling that you can use any module. You know, from the old days, you could run any module. The thing that I find with a lot of old modules, because I've dug up, you know, I used to own a lot of old ones, and I've since gone hunting for some of them. And you look at some of them and you think, these were never play tested. You know, you read these descriptions and you're like, someone's kind of rushed this out to print, and it's not really been play tested. So it's nice to know that you're taking that feedback from your players and using it in the development of the adventure and the development of the game.
To be fair about these playtest things, I think some adventures, even if they're not playtested, they're more like art pieces for you to get inspired to do something else, I guess. So I won't say like you have to playtest everything. Sometimes it's more like a conceptual piece, you know?
See, I'm coming from the position that I'm a risk-adverse project manager in real life, and I will use the word pilot over and over again with something, but that's because I don't have that artistic flair to just make things happen. Now, I backed the Kickstarter for Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy, and originally I was just in it for the two books, the two Advanced Fantasy books, and then Necrotic Gnome had to use that term, faux leatherette cover tomes with silver foiling, and suddenly I'm like, take my money, go on, I'll go all in. But obviously it came with these lovely adventures, and yours was one of several adventures that came in. I was ridiculously excited when the Kickstarter box turned up, and sending pictures to my co-hosts like, look what turned up in the post today, this is amazing.
I'm still waiting mine here.
Still, it's a shame. The books are, they are at the risk of being a complete fanboy for the stuff Necrotic Gnome produces. It's not just that they look good, it's they are laid out so well. Layout is such a big part of games design, and I've bought like numerous books over the years, and with some of them the layout is actually crippling for anyone running the game. We talked about in our last podcast Palladium Games. Now, I love Palladium Games, I love their settings. Their books are just a horror show of layout. You have these two columns with a wall of text in each column. It's badly referenced. Whereas with the Necrotic Gnome stuff, much like with these adventures, the format is laid out so that you really have everything you need, almost in a double-sided spread. Yeah. And then you flip over to the next one and it's there. And
I learned a lot from them too. They're really good.
The design quality is great. And these little A5 books, that was a revelation to me. At first I was like, A5, what, like kids' storybooks used to come in? And now I'm like, these are so handy. You know, you're sitting at the table, hand it over to the players. You don't have to have this massive A4 book that, weighs an absolute ton, and you're like, let me flick to page 607 to go through there. Not that there's anything wrong with massive books. I've got a shelf of massive books behind me, but I love
DCC, and DCC is like a huge book. I love it. But for practicality, like I'm going to a friend's house, I'm going to run a game there. So I just put like small books in my bag and off I go, right?
It's definitely the way to do it. Have you seen any of the other adventures that were produced alongside yours in the Kickstarter, or were the authors all working in isolation from each other?
I saw it briefly. I have the PDFs from them because I backed the Kickstarter, but I'm really more like I like to hold the book to read it.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm waiting for them to arrive for me to read them, but I saw them all, and I talked to some of the other authors because we are friends. Like Don't Straw, he's a DCC guy, so I already knew him, and when he knew I was being invited to write an adventure, he contacted me. Oh, that's so cool! I'm writing one too, and we always like trade information, talk to each other, and we have plans on working on stuff together too. For DCC and other stuff.
That's good to know. And again, it's like you've highlighted in the community, that intersharing of ideas. And it's something that I've actually found to be a refreshing change of pace. So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was very into World of Darkness games. I ran a big Vampire LARP for years. I played in various World of Darkness games. And one of the things that I found was lots of people who were running games and making their own stuff, they were sort of jealously guarding the stuff that they came up with. There was a game that I used to play in, and one of the storytellers had this status system that he'd implemented, this homebrew status system. Nobody understood how it worked apart from him, and he like steadfastly refused to give these secrets out to anyone. Whereas you fast forward now, and people are almost cross-pollinating. I see it like in the Merkborg community where there seems to be there's a game jam every second week of people like, hey, let's do this thing for Merkborg. And people just share and reuse ideas. Like one of their creators put a piece of art up on his Twitter account and said, hey guys, take this, use it in your games, do what you want with it. That's a piece of art that's taken someone a good few hours to put together. And he's like, yeah, just take it, do something with it. And I love how open and refreshing that is. And it's strange because sometimes you can see, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole because it'll go to a bad place, but sometimes you see some fairly poisonous arguments online in the role-playing community. And I always find myself sitting back and thinking, but ultimately we are talking about pretendy fun time games with elves here. Why are people, on one hand, arguing over which class in D&D is best, and on the other hand, you've got another thread where people are giving out free stuff and saying, take my stuff and use it in your own creations, which is absolutely the side of the community that I love the most. Now, something I have to ask you about Halls of the Blood King, there's a lot of really good plot threads in here. In fact, if you go to, let me find it here, I had this all bookmarked beforehand, so I'll have to edit this out to make it look like I actually know what I'm doing here. But you've got your random happenings table, and you've got your rumours table, and you've got hooks, and you've got unanswered mysteries. Now, these pages, again, very well laid out. They are all, I'm flipping the pages, nobody can see this, but very well laid out. To me, reading through that, I was like, these are like the seeds for a campaign, especially the unanswered mysteries. You read through that, and some of the encounters you have in the game, you're like, oh, I could do something with that. Are you planning to expand on that, or is that your little gift to games masters everywhere to say, guys, take this and build a universe around it?
Well, if Necrotic Gnome invites me to further develop that or develop something else, I'll gladly do it.
Gavin, if you're listening, there's a campaign the size of Masks of Nyarlathotep waiting to be born here.
but I like adventures that do that. I remember there's some DCC modules that do that. They always leave something behind that, hey, pay attention to this. This you can develop further. You can explore where this goes. I think it adds value to the adventure if it's not something self-contained. Okay, you completed the adventure, did everything, but there is some small pieces that you can follow the thread and find something new and creating something of your own. Like it's like almost like a collaborative creation between the designer and the game masters, and I love that. So I wanted to explore this on the adventure too.
I love that as well. There's a thing that I do when I run games. I keep a pad similar to this one, and when things come up, whether it's an NPC or a plot thread or something, I'll write it down. Because what will happen inevitably is all the carefully crafted stuff that I've thought of will be ignored, and they will focus on some random
something
detail.
else.
I play with my kids occasionally. My son loves making friends with NPCs. And it's usually the most innocuous thing. It's like some random kobold knocking about the dungeon. He's like, oh, I want to make friends with him. Like, okay, he's a kobold. I've got to think of a name for this kobold.
Okay, my kids does exactly that too.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we want to be friends with Boglin the Goblin. You're like, oh, really? Okay, this goblin traipses around after you. But I recently ran a game for some family and friends, and with some younger kids who had never played before. They absolutely loved it. And I just written a generic dungeon. There's an evil wizard, he's doing bad evil wizard things, go get him, team, and they all go down the dungeon. What I didn't realise was, and I should have because I've been a kid myself playing these games, is how much some of the really innocuous threads totally captured their imagination. And afterwards, the questions I was getting of, so that guy that we let go, where's he gone? What's he doing now? Why was that thing there? Those creatures, well, they came after we'd gone into that room. So who told them? And it's what I love about the hobby. And it's why I picked up on that particular part there is you leave that open for people to develop further and develop into their own campaign. Yeah, it's a really, as you say, it's a gift from the designer to the player to expand. But also, again, Gavin, if you're listening, there's a campaign here, mate. You need to get this published. I also really loved, buried amongst those same parts of the book, you've got a section on vampires and vampiric traits. Now, your vampires in this book, as I said, they're very different from your classic Transylvanian guy living in a castle, being very polite. They have a very alien aspect to them, but you spend time, you detail what they can do, what they can't do, and you include options. Like there's a rule for energy drain, and you're like, if this is too harsh, you can do this instead. Is your take on vampires from this book that you want the players or the games master to do what they want, or are you influenced by any specific media or style of vampire that's caused this to come about?
Well, for me, depending on the orange of the vampire, I would like to modify something or subvert some normal expectations about vampires, right? So I don't have like a set formula. Oh, my vampires are always this way. So if I'm doing a vampire that, I don't know, lives on the moon, it would be a different vampire, you know, or a vampire that hides between this world and the other in the mirror. Maybe it's something else. Maybe he's made of glass and the glass turns red when it drinks blood. I don't know. I always try to make something different, right?
I like the fact that one of your vampires isn't actually a vampire. He's a sorcerer who's kind of spying in the vampires. And I read that and I was like, that's a scene waiting to happen where people suddenly become aware of the fact that, hang on, he's not one of us, and calamity ensues. But it definitely gives it a very particular feel to it. There are a lot of games that deal with vampires, and they kind of go one of two ways. They go the way of kind of early Ravenloft, where you're basically fighting Dracula. They go World of Darkness, where all the vampires are incredibly sexy and seductive, except the ones who aren't, who are just really angry and they like to kill things. And there's occasionally something in between. Or you get the Blade vampires who are just mindless drones there to be mowed down. But when you read your description, you've got this great hall in there where the vampires are hanging out, waiting to meet the Blood King and do their thing. And each and every one of them is pretty much a match for most of the party. And that's what I like about your adventure, because it's not linear. They can go around from room to room, but there's a lot of it where you're like, the best course of action these players can take is to leave that room and go elsewhere or explore elsewhere or find something that's going to help them. Because that encounter with potentially a whole load of vampires happens very early on. They kind of walk in the gates and there's a big door there.
It depends how they explore the dungeon.
Yeah, and I like that. I was actually having a discussion with, I'll give a shout out to Ennie, old shabby gamer on Twitter, and we were talking about really big scenarios, big published scenarios, and how there's a tendency, despite how they get dressed up, to ultimately railroad players, in that you've kind of got to do certain things in a certain order or something doesn't happen. And one of the ones we were looking at is the Enemy Within campaign for Warhammer. I love the Enemy Within. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was my first big RPG, and I've run the Enemy Within loads of times. And one of the things I've always found every time I run it is there is a railroady element to it. Because if you look at one of the very first adventures, it's a great adventure, but you ultimately have to get the players from A to B. And the actual clue that takes them from A to B is really, really subtle. The very first time I read through it, in fairness, I was much younger and I was about 12, I was like, why would they go there? And then realised, it's on this handout. But every time I've run it, I've kind of had to shove the players in that direction to make sure that they go that way. What I found with your module is there's the bit at the beginning that says, okay, you need a rationale why the players are going here, rather than you turn up and there's this big castle, go and explore it. But once they're in there, they're free to explore any way they want. There's no signs pointing, hey, Blood King this way, off you go.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite
and
refreshing.
Depending on what they find there, they might just change their objective, because they might find out some information that they okay, that thing we wanted to do, no, let's try something else because the situation has changed.
But there's also in there, which again I like, and I think this is probably my roots in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, where I like sort of darker, grittier fantasy. D&D is very kind of noble, bright, let's strap on the armor and go and fight the bad guys, chaps. In your adventure, there is not an assumption that the characters are good guys, and there's even options for them to, you know what, let's go and hang out with the vampires, let's work with the vampires, let's serve the Blood King. That sounds like a good idea.
They can become agents of the Blood King, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that open-endedness, I see that in a lot actually of Necrotic Gnomes products. I don't know if it's a brief they give, but there's this desire almost to create a setting that you can then explore. Like this book, yes, it's a scenario, but it's also, to my mind, a source book for a location that can be used anywhere. And as you see, you can spin a whole mythology off this as to why the Blood King's doing his thing, why he turns up, who's there to pay him tithes, etc., etc. As I said, my rampant fanboyism for this book is coming up. When I saw that you were wanting to do interviews, I was like, but I love this book. I need to speak to this guy. So it's very much a highly recommended adventure. And again, it doesn't need to be for old school essentials. You can do it with any of the OSR kind of classic fantasy type games, which I think is wonderful.
I have a friend running DCC funnels with this. Like, they are some of the people that are being taken by the servants of the Blood King to pay the taxes, and they try to escape the castle, the manor.
Fantastic. So, question I have to ask you is, how did it feel to be nominated for an Ennie?
I talked about it a little bit on Twitter. For me, it's kind of surreal. It's kind of like a dream, because the first thing I published was 5 years ago, was Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells. And it's not even total 5 years ago, because it was in October. So, and I always watched these people that were, for me, they were like celebrities being nominated, and people I would follow, and they would never follow me back, but I would just like hide in the shadows and just observing what they're doing and trying to study what the products they wrote to learn something. And like Fear of the Black Dragon, just the podcast talking about my adventure, like reviewing. I listened to all of their episodes, like trying to learn how to make a good adventure. And to be honest, I never really had much confidence in my adventure writing. I like it to write systems and tools, because you do what you want with them, and I'm not responsible to like making a cohesive plot for you to explore. And I was always afraid my adventures wouldn't be good enough. And after years of just making my own stuff, and since last year, started being invited to do things with other people, because I'm a South American and my English is not perfect, and I always
English is better than my Portuguese, believe me.
And I always saw myself like an outsider, like I will never belong here. Like I'm people are welcoming because they're nice, but I always thought I was like a tourist there, you know. And to be invited to work with creators I admire and I always observed from afar, and to be nominated to one of the most prestigious awards in the industry, and that's basically saying you are like on par with them, you are on the same category with them. It's kind of really me. It's surreal for me. It's hard to believe.
Well, I think it's well deserved, and also the thing I'm loving for you is, if you actually look on Tabletop RPG Twitter, there's a lot of talk about your module. People seem to really like it, and I think you mentioned there that you normally like to make systems rather than settings. You've kind of done both with this, because as I mentioned beforehand, there's not a distinct you must go here and do this thing, otherwise bad stuff happens. It's here is a setting for you, here's how the setting works, because again, without spoiling it, there's a lot of moving parts in this scenario, which I love. you need to negotiate, you need to talk, you need to do things, and you've created something here that I think resonates with a lot of players because you give them that freedom. There's no on-rails aspect to this. You've given them a setting that they can go, that they can play in, and it's also very evocative. It's not the standard creepy castle on the hill where there's a guy in an opera cloak hanging out, wanting to do bad things. It's very alien. It's got a dimensional aspect to it. It just seems really original. So I think the praise you're getting is well deserved. Hopefully, people, if you've not already done so, go and vote for it in the Ennies. Please
vote for me. I mean, just to be nominated, it's like a huge honor, and I'm already super happy, and certainly will be one of the highlights of this year. But if I somehow win that, it's going to be amazing, and I'll certainly be speechless if that happens. And I'm a really big fan of some of the stuff it's running against me too. So there
is a ton of good stuff on that list. I think I would be super daunted if my name appeared on there and then I looked at again at who I was up against, because you read through that list and it's like there's nobody there doing bad stuff. there's nothing in there. You're like, well, he's not going to win. Everything conceivably has a good chance.
It's all for grabs, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, here's my question. I know I've kind of joked about taking the Halls of the Blood King and making a campaign, but what's next for you? Do you have any projects you're currently working on?
Oh yeah, I'm finishing the final edits to release a supplement for my urban horror and game called Dark Suits and Darker Secrets, and I made a supplement for it called War of the Magi, which focuses on various factions of sorcerers living in our world and their enemies, and the returning of one of their enemies that's going to start a war. So it focuses on that and presents new ways to use a magic system that's more freeform and has an adventure too. I'm also working on finishing the final edits for Cosmosaurs, which is like a simplified Forged in the Dark game about space rangers that are dinosaur space rangers. So they battle enemies and evil villains, and one of the evil villains is like a clan of slime bankers. And I have also Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells 2nd edition that has already been written. It's on editing, and we're making illustrations. Like War of the Magi and Cosmosaurs are basically ready, just need to fix some of the text, but it has layout, it has art, and the text is done, just the editing part that's missing. To be honest, I have like 16 things that I'm working simultaneously, but those are the 3 that are most complete to be released soon.
I think what you've just described is essentially the plight of everyone who really gets involved with the hobby. I was actually talking to my regular gaming group about this last night, and Steve, my co-host, was saying that, we're playing this game just now, but we've got this big list of stuff that we want to do and all these ideas for all these other games we want to play. And I was sitting the other day writing a Call of Cthulhu scenario that I want to run, meanwhile also running other games and going, I really need to finish that. Is there anything else you'd like to promote? We always like to give our guests a chance to do this. If there's anything out there that you think, whether it's your own stuff or other stuff that you admire and you want people to have more visibility of, what would you, if you've got 2 minutes to do it, what are you going to promote?
Okay, I have a zine with other Brazilian creators called Random Encounters. It's currently on Drive to RPG on PDF, but we're going to soon release it on print on demand. It has stuff from various creators, me, Guilherme Gondito, Lucas Rolim, Thiago Rolim, who has unfortunately passed away this year because of COVID, and Tortellione, and all these other creators that are working on the international scene that are from Brazil. Stay tuned for that, and if I can, also stay tuned for the hashtag RPG Latam, which are basically creators from Latin America, from Mexico all the way down to Argentina and Chile. So there's a lot of people doing great stuff there. So if you can watch out there what they're doing, we really appreciate the eyes and the opportunity to share what we're creating down here.
Well, listen, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. As I said, my fanboyism for your work probably came across a bit too much there. Hopefully that wasn't too creepy for you. But
that was great. I'm really thankful for you inviting me here and being welcoming and talking about my stuff. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity you're giving me.
Not at all. I mean, you'd be pleased to know that I've had a whole, when I put up on Twitter and Instagram that, hey, I'm going to be talking to Diogo today, I had a whole load of messages of people who are genuinely excited for the episode. So you've obviously got other fans out there, people who like your work. So we'll see how that goes. But thank you once again. An absolute pleasure talking to you, and good luck with the Ennies.
Yeah, thank you. Whatever happens, I'm happy.
And that was our interview with Diogo Nogueira, author of Halls of the Blood King, an adventure for old school essentials. Hopefully, after what you've heard here, you'll go and check it out. It can be found on DriveThruRPG or on the Necrotic Gnomes website. We're also going to be putting links to Diogo's DriveThruRPG page, his itch page, his web page, and also some of the material he mentioned on the podcast. Check it out. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. We're a monthly podcast about the history of old school RPGs, although lately we've got involved in a lot of other things like interviews like this one and actual plays as well. If you fancy checking out our actual plays, we currently have got some Paranoia actual plays and an ongoing Slay Industries actual play as well. You can find these on our website. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at Save Podcast or on Facebook by searching for Roll to Save. You can also email us at roll.2.save.pod@gmail.com. Thanks very much for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.